First Universalist church members in Denver are a great example of living their values through the renovation of their building. The whole congregation got together and decided to shoot for zero emission, not an easy or cheap goal, but one they truly believed in. Let's head inside and find out more from these amazing people. We're talking to church members John Bringenberg and Milt Hetrick, Reverend Dr. Elaine Paraslua, and Communications Coordinator Jessica Montgomery about their goal to design a zero carbon footprint building. And while this green light has nothing to do with sustainability, it's a very cool design feature. Find out what it is a little bit later. So Milt, if you'd be so kind, I mean, you have a brilliant mind in applied engineering that you did in helping this project come together, but tell us a little bit of your background, all the good street cred that you had through the schooling and work that you've done before quasi-retiring and then working on a project like this. No.
Well, I got my engineering degree in aerospace, and I spent probably the first 10 years in aerospace, left the industry and went into the oil and gas field for about 3 years. Was involved in some oil shale technology, then ended up going back to aerospace where I retired. And in the meantime, I also got a degree in physics. So little did I know I was going to be applying it to a church project.
And you did great work with it. So related to the church project, obviously, can you tell me briefly why you, the congregation, the people working on this, chose to do such a high-performance building instead of simply meeting code, like so many other projects?
Sure. This project, we have to kind of go back and recall that it got started around 2015. And at that point in time, the global community, as you know, was becoming very concerned about the climate crisis, global warming, and that was the year actually of COP21 and the Paris Agreement,
right,
where the global community made an agreement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit global warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees.
Right.
So that was the big picture that was going on at the time this project got started. Now, if we come down a little bit, our religious denomination, the Unitarian Universalist Association, they had published what we refer to as statements of conscience. Within this church, we had a small group of environmental activists that we called ourselves the Green First Task Force. We were concerned about the growth of our congregation and that we needed more space, more classrooms, a bigger sanctuary. And so we initiated a building renovation project. And one of the members of our task force, John Bringenberg, who got himself positioned on the building committee, right, and made sure that we had sustainability perspectives as design requirements for this renovation project.
You know a lot about this building, about the whole process, but what I'm really fascinated by in this project was the why people came together to do this great project.
When you have a church community, you have a unique people environment to make decisions of this kind. We, of course, have to think about the economic impacts of energy decisions when we're redesigning this building. But being in a church community, you have the opportunity to bring in another dimension, something that maybe it doesn't exist in a normal commercial business, for example. And in our case, that's what we call our seventh principle.
This amazing building is a manifestation of many beautiful principles and values that come from the Unitarian Universalist Church, and I'd love to learn more about that.
I would say the general value of Unitarian Universalism is to live your faith, to live out the principles, and we have 7 of them, and they are about democracy, about how you treat one another, the dignity and worth of every human. But the one that's important to this project is the 7th principle, and that one is we are all part of an interdependent web of all life, and that we are to recognize our equity with all other beings, sentient and not, and the earth, and to care for the earth as stewards.
Well, early on, we did our homework and tried to define what I'll call the harm that we were doing to our planet, and quantified it in the context of tons of CO2 that this facility was introducing into the atmosphere. And what we learned was kind of shocking. We learned that because of the electricity that we bought from our utility company, Xcel Energy, they in turn were dumping about 50 metric tons of CO2 a year into the atmosphere, and we were buying natural gas from them and burning that on site in 10 different gas furnaces and dumping ourselves another 50 metric tons into the atmosphere.
Right.
We also were aware that there are alternatives to doing that.
Can you tell me a little bit about the story and the process of how people came together, especially around the funding portions of this project, to make it happen? Because it's a great story.
It is, yes. We had a capital campaign for the building renovation well underway, and working with the architects when a member-driven initiative, a very bold one, came up to add a sustainable energy system, and also add the cost for a sustainable energy system.
It's challenging for several reasons. First off, it added more than 10% to the cost of the total building project.
And being understandably debt avoidant, the church just asked, can we go ask for additional gifts specifically for the sustainable energy system, and then close the gap as needed with a member loan.
So the community, as I heard it, came together and said, we're not going to try and get the maximum dollar out of the church that we can. We want to give a gift, but we need to get our money back, plus get 1.5%, you said, interest on it?
Right.
In exchange. That sounds like a beautiful win-win.
Yeah, we thought that was a rather unique approach because going in, the first response we got from just about everybody was, we can't afford that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, member-led, member-driven effort. We exceeded our goal in the additional member gifts, specifically to add the sustainable energy system to the building project. And then with the remaining funds, members came together and formed a general partnership, the seventh principal partnership.
Cool.
And that bold move paid off. We were able to see the project completed.
You were heavily involved in many of the technical aspects of this project. And I had the pleasure of working with you guys and being involved with doing airtightness inspections and blower doors and things. But can you tell me a bit about what you chose to do, let's say starting with the envelope of the building?
Okay, great. This was a retrofit, so there was about 20% new square footage added to an existing building, which was restored and rebuilt. But in doing so, we were able to get nearly the entire building envelope with new insulation, including a skim coat of foam on the outside, bat fiberglass insulation, to bring us to about an R30 value in the walls.
Which is great.
We have a flat roof for most of the roof on the building, including the original parts of the building. And we were able to really beef that up. And we went from having about 2 inches of solid foam insulation to having about 6 inches, bringing us to an R value above 50.
Which is really amazing, because your beginning levels, you were closer to like an R14 or R13 maybe, and to be above R50 up there is just outstanding.
In the design of the envelope, airtightness, making the building tight was really the first parameter, and the R value was really a secondary parameter. We employ, for the first time in this building, 5 ERV units, and those ERV units work hand in glove with the envelope being as tight as it can be.
Yeah. And one thing I can share, since I did the testing, is that the building came in at a test level of a 0.188
Wow.
CFM per square foot at 75 pascals, which is amazing because code for new construction, not a remodel, but new construction is 0.4. So you were less than half, as far as that standard goes for new construction. So you guys did some really good stuff with that part of it. If I may, I want to ask you to get a little more in depth about the ground source heat pump system, the technology, because it's a new enough technology. I mean, it's been being used in the Midwest for a decade or more, and in other cases, but it's still an exception. We don't see it in enough projects, and so you were quite innovative to bring it in.
Well, if this were a new construction and we didn't have a parking lot paved and landscaping in, we probably would have selected a so-called horizontal installation of these heat exchange pipes.
Right.
It's the cheapest way to do it, but
And
because...
how shallow or how deep would that have to have been?
Well,
if you
they
could-
probably go down 6 or 8 feet.
Okay.
The alternative is to drill 5-inch diameter holes down and insert black plastic pipes in a vertical
Right.
manner.
The materials that you have in this building, the pumps, the piping for it, even the air handlers themselves with the water, connecting back into the air handler from the, ground source loop field, all look, and they are just really off the shelf. I mean, they're just common
It's all
products.
commercial.
There's nothing that's like incredibly innovative with that part of it, which is great. Makes it easy for repairs and things like that going down the road. So you were an integral part of having solar PV, photovoltaic, put onto this building to power a tremendous amount of this building's need for energy. So can you tell me a bit about the system you chose and how much it's helping offset right now for you guys?
Yeah, thanks. We knew that being able to generate electricity on site was key to our goal of having a zero carbon footprint building. We planned a system that was designed to cover approximately 100 to 105% of our projected energy needs.
Yeah, that's great.
And we used about, I would say about 80% of the space on the roof to accommodate that. So we knew that we had a little bit of room to grow if needed, and that we have a system that is about a 58 kW system. It generates between, we'll call it 80 and 85,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year. And we're now finding after over a year of usage that we may be a little shy of 100%, and we have the space on the roof to be able to increase the size of that system to make sure that we are at 100%.
And that's being given serious consideration that you may add to it in the near future?
That is correct, because we set out and the congregation agreed to a goal of being carbon neutral, and that's part of that equation.
So John, tell me what this great performance boils down to in dollars and cents for you on your utility bills on an annual basis.
Our historic bills on the building, which was a little smaller before, was over $20,000 per year. We are now spending about 20% of that amount with the new systems in place, and I would say that the vast majority of those charges are considered base charges and demand charges.
That's fantastic. That's really fantastic. So there's some beautiful things that you did with daylight in here.
The architects that helped design the building placed a high value on daylighting and did their very best to be able to bring daylighting into every common space in the building. That was very challenging in the lower level, which prior to the remodel was a typical church basement with very small edge windows. But they were successful at getting some daylighting there. Some of it comes through sonotubes from the roof. Some of it comes through some clever arrangement and enlargement of windows in the lower space. But there are other places in the building where daylighting is even more dramatic. The space that we're in right now, we call Friendship Hall. It's a gathering space. And then our sanctuary has maybe the most important architectural feature, we call it the oculus. It beautifully brings in light with north-facing windows, and it really does a great job of lighting the whole sanctuary space. For this building, it's our wow factor.
I'd love to hear from you because I know it was part of, I see it as being part of your vision to be very conscientious about reusing and using recycled materials in the building. Can you tell us a bit about those elements, like what got reused, what parts of the recycling elements that you're proud of?
Sure, the chairs are one of many elements that we reused. So the green chairs that you see were our original chairs in our sanctuary, and we simply cleaned them. And as much furniture and other elements we could reuse, we did. In our hospitality center, the ceiling panels, so that whole space was a sanctuary, as you may know, and that was the entire ceiling. And so they took them down and carefully preserved them. There are other materials, right, that were, it was probably much more work to do the demolition in order to be able to preserve them.
I think if I was going to pick one thing that symbolizes the intentions and the fulfillment of those intentions very much is the beauty of the wood.
In the sanctuary, we have a dramatic effect from beetle kill pine wood, which is an inferior species, but there's a lot of it.
So often people think if you're going to use recycled or you're going to be environmentally sound, it's going to be ugly. And I don't think you have to compromise anything. And this building is a statement of the beauty that can be created being environmentally conscious. And I think that's the most outstanding piece for me.
You literally wrote the book on this project, and it's a fantastic book with great graphics, great data details, great descriptions of the process about how the community came together on the financing side as well as the technical decisions. And I know you have this available through the church, but we're going to have it available at our Heart of a Building website so people can get to a link.
Thank you. And it was a team effort just like this project was. So we had this small group of dedicated people, and I just happened to be the reporter and document it. But we did go through a lot of lessons learned, and it wasn't all, how should I say, roses along the path. So we wanted to document some of these things that we learned in the hopes that it would make it a little easier for the next group that comes down this same path.
That's a beautiful gift. Remember that green light from the beginning of our story? It's from a solstice window across from the Oculus, one of just a few dozen in the United States. 4 times during the year, a small light appears during solstice and equinox events. A beautiful touch on this awesome building. For every effort that brings change in our world, a champion is required. A person or persons who see the vision inside of themselves and then shares it with others. In the case of First Universalist Church, it was a community of people envisioning the need for their building to serve as an example of a structure that is in harmony with nature. And they succeeded. A huge thank you to First Universalist Church for sharing their beautiful remodel with us, taking us through the design and their heart-centered reasoning behind it. You can learn more about the technical details about this project by watching the technical video and seeing documentation at the Heart of a Building website.